Good morning. The Committee of the Whole is called back to order on Substitute Bill 26-37 COR. Unfortunately, we don't have a quorum, but I'd like to thank my colleagues that have joined me this morning, Senator Guåhan, Senator Tello, Senator Dwayne Nicholas, Senator Frank Blas. And with that, we will continue to recess till we receive a quorum. Committee of the House called to order. Colleagues, we will begin with Senator Snickers' amendment on page 114. Would you please read your amendment, Senator Snickers?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. Good morning, colleagues. This is an amendment I'm proposing on page 114 to add a new section to Chapter 11 of this bill to read, Section Appropriation for Sanctuary Incorporated of Guam for fiscal year 2024. The sum of $250,000 is appropriated from the audited fiscal year 2023 annual general fund excess revenues to the Department of Administration for these sanctuaries.
Senator Snickers,
Yes, sir.
you're supposed to read the Crime Stoppers one.
Oh, the Crime Stoppers one?
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No problem.
Just got mixed up here a little bit.
No problem.
I had so many wish lists.
So we're going to start all over and start.
Yes,
with the
sir.
Crime
Yes, sir.
Stoppers.
Okay. Yes, sir. So
Thank you.
sorry, everybody. Okay. This is for page 114 to add a new section of Chapter 11 of the bill to read, Section Allocation for Guam Crime Stoppers for fiscal year 2024. The sum of $100,000 shall be allocated to the Department of Administration from the General Fund Appropriation in subsection M1, Chapter 5 of the Act of the Guam Crime Stoppers. So I've been asked by Crime Stoppers to help them, assist them, because they have doing such good work trying to help the community, preventing crime, and also putting out information out there to assist the community, which is really a great thing, and I ask my colleagues for their support for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Snickers. Does anyone like to comment to that? Madam Speaker.
Mr. Chair, just if someone could clarify, I thought Crime Stoppers is a nonprofit organization, and did we ever appropriate for them before? And are they going, if you could just clarify, and why that wasn't included by OFB in the budget originally, if this is a need?
All right. Steve, if you can answer that.
Yes, Senator. In FY23, we appropriated $50,000 to the Crime Stopper program.
Was that the first time? And
yes, for FY23, we did appropriate $50,000 to the Crime Stoppers, but in FY24, there was no funds requested for the Crime Stoppers.
do you know in FY23 what that was supposed to be used for and whether it was used?
A detailed breakdown was provided, Senator, as to the use of the $50,000. Just the request was made to fund the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only concern is that, I mean, I know they do great work, and I know they do fundraisers always, but this is money that's going to come out of where? Subsection M1 of Chapter 5. This is the police department, right?
Yes, it comes out of GPD.
Yeah, so that's my only concern, is if the chief is going, you know, I thought we gave him a pretty bare bones budget, GPD, and we were trying to find more money for additional, so that's all. I'm just worried about the impact of this on GPD. If we could get this money somewhere else, I'm all for it.
Yes, Senator. The way we're doing it this year is we're actually taking, the funding is going to come from GPD and going to Department of Administration as a pass-through to the Crime Stoppers. So the funding source for this appropriation is actually coming from GPD's appropriation.
Right, which they didn't allocate for when they, that's all. Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there another funding source we could use for this?
Yes, Senator. In FY24, again, you know, there was no request by the Crime Stoppers or GPD to fund this program. It's just that, you know, we are funding it at $100,000, as a pass-through through DOA to the Crime Stoppers, and the funding source will be the Guam Police Department's appropriation.
Does anyone, Senator Tello, for comments on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern here is that, number one, it wasn't requested by Crime Stoppers. It wasn't even requested from GPD as well. I think when we first intended to give some funding to the Crime Stoppers of only $50,000, it was to help them. It's a nonprofit organization. If we start going down this route, we're going to have every nonprofit organization coming in front of us asking for funding. Now, it's one thing if they came and asked us for it, and it's another thing if they came and told us what they used the first $50,000 that we gave them and provide us how they spent it on. I mean, I am a very good friend of McDonald, who's one of the greatest advocates. I think he's even the director of Crime Stoppers, and he gives me reports all the time about their fundraising. He also gives me reports on going off island, taking several of himself and another person off island to attend conferences and meetings. So there's no doubt they're doing a great job, and this is a great program. But we have to be very cautious on how we spend our funding that we are not very clear on. I mean, $99 million additional for this budget could be very iffy. So even though I support Crime Stoppers in every way possible, I just don't think that we should take from GPD. They are having a difficult time as it is. Just the other day, I got a friend of mine who's here from off island saying, gosh, I hardly see any police officers on the road. I don't see any of them. And I think GPD is doing everything they can possible to make a presence on this island, and the funding that they have is they need more funding. So here we are taking $100,000 that was never even requested from Crime Stoppers, and then at the same time doubling what we've given them in the past, doubling that amount. I'd very much like to support a bill that comes in front of of this body. Anybody wants to introduce a bill later on, once we find some funding to support the nonprofit organization, I'm for that. But right now we're in budget time. We're in a time where we need to support our line agencies, our agencies. That's what we need to support first. And if we were to call GPD right now and ask them, I hope somebody does, call them right now and ask them, can you afford to take that $100,000 away from your budget? Then just give them a call. Let's find out if GPD can afford to do that. So, Mr. Chair, if anybody wants to call them up, they can call them up right now. In the meantime, I'm going to have to stand in objection of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Madam Vice, I think you had your hand up, ma'am. Comment on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Manana Sizuis, Mr. Chair, maybe even a clarification on a point of information. Have we given money to nonprofit organizations in the past? Yes, most definitely. Have we gotten committee reports or reporting requirements from these nonprofit organizations? It's almost always, 99% of the time, 99.9 is probably what I want to say, that there is always a reporting mechanism that's attached to that. I stand and rise in support, Mr. Chair, of this amendment by the good Senator that we call Santa Claus, because it does give the opportunity for Crime Stoppers, who's been working hand in hand with the Guam Police Department for many, many decades, and in their efforts of literally trying to deter crime here, Guam Crime Stoppers has literally been up at the forefront for helping GPD on a lot of what they do. And you, Mr. Chair, know that firsthand, being a former Guam Police Department officer, know that this program has been around forever. And we do. And every time we give to a nonprofit who literally works the mission mandate for the government entity, we call working together, just like public-private partnerships that the government of Guam has been working with. Nonprofit organizations help with the mandates at a much lesser cost. And this is no different. We've done this to this certain nonprofit in the past, and they've had to do the reporting requirements too. So, Mr. Chair, I just want to say for the record, I stand and rise in support of this, and I hope somebody who's listening from the Guam Police Department would be able to call in and share what they've done, the successes they've done in the past, and the networking and the collaboration that they've done to help keep our community safe. So thank you, and I thank the good author for proffering this amendment. Sana Masi.
Thank you, Madam Vice.
Point of information, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. I have sent a text to Chief
McDonald?
Ignacio
Oh.
asking him that question, so
Okay.
I'm just waiting for his reply, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anybody else like to comment to the amendment? Senator Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this amendment. I think Senator San Nicolas has his eye on the ball with this amendment. Guam Crime Stoppers is an extraordinarily important part of the enforcement of our criminal laws, and people worry, well, you know, GPD, this is going to take money out of their pocket. How much money does GPD save because citizens are reporting criminal activity, and saves them a lot of shoe leather and everything else, getting their job done. So this is a wonderful investment in the community. You know, when we stand up and we say we really support these people, then that means we have to support them. We have to pay. We can't stand up and say we support it, but we're not going to give you any money. So thank you, Senator San Nicolas, for this, and I rise in support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to comment to this amendment? I'm looking across the board, and I see no one. Senator Roy.
I commend my colleague from the great village of Agate. I think it's a genuine effort to support the criminal public service announcements out there. And I think the author of us and a lot of us just want to make sure that crime is being stopped. And I think this is a very fitting proposal, and I just rise in support of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Blas, my fellow police officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, Mr. Chair, while I do support the amendment, however, I would like to ask that, you know, the good senator from Tamuning had sent a request via text to the chief, and if we can give that time to be able to, We recess for a couple of minutes, please, so that we can get that.
All right. We'll just take a quick recess to give the communication time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee hall is called back to order. Senator Blas, I think there's already a compromise.
Yeah, I think that because of that, Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and use the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Barnett, I know you have an amendment to this amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I of course, fully support Uncle Jim and the Guam Crime Stoppers, and they have worked very well with the Guam Police Department hand in hand, but I just want to be sure that the Guam Police Department is going to be okay with this, and I know they will. And so I would like to just amend this amendment to read allocation for the Guam Crime Stoppers for fiscal year 2024, the sum of $100,000, and then strike shall and place may.
Okay, my colleagues, that's the amendment, is strike the word shall to may. Does anybody feel they need to speak on this? Okay.
Let me, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, strike shall, put may, be allocated to the Department of Administration from the General Fund appropriation in subsection M1 of Chapter 5 of this Act for the Guam Crime Stoppers at the discretion of the Chief of Police.
So it's at the end, at the discretion of the...
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in the event there's any, delay or difficulty, I can be sure to follow up with the chief. But obviously, Guam Crime Stoppers, in my opinion, fills a great need in our community. We've all heard from Chief Ignacio of the officer shortages across the department, and efforts like Guam Crime Stoppers and also all of our neighborhood watch groups have really helped us shore up a lot of these areas where we're not meeting the need of the community. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also ask the support of my colleagues. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone want to speak? Senator Dueñas?
Just want to say, Mr. Chairman, and I support this amendment, and for two reasons. First of all, because we do need to shore up Crime Stoppers. But in talking to the author of the original amendment and understanding kind of how the mechanism now with GPD, either they permanently do or on a case-by-case basis, actually have an officer, to man this desk and to man these calls coming in, which makes sense because these are calls coming in that could solve crimes, that could give information to the officers, that it makes their job easier on the street, on the beat. And so the second part of it is, through this process as a may provision, it means that what's the priority of the chief? The chief is going to be the one to decide, hey, we're going to get this allocation, we're going to get this money over to Crime Stoppers because allow them to evaluate their civilian capabilities and somebody who may be a retired police officer or something that they would bring on board in order to conduct that operation, which makes sense because it's at their discretion and it doesn't take an officer. And so they're really kind of utilizing that appropriation and that maneuverability to administer the program going forward. So I think we have consensus offline in speaking with the author, but I support this amendment to the amendment. Just Masi, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. Anyone else like to speak? Senator Snickers, did you want to comment to the amendment, to your amendment?
Yes. Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody involved here in the compromise, Senator Barnett, Senator Chris, Senator Tello, and Vice Speaker for working together here to do this amendment to the amendment and making it more, I guess, judicious and fair. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. That being said, does anyone else need to speak? Senator Barnett, you need close? No. If there are no objection, the amendment to the amendment is passed. Now to the amendment as amended. Senator Tello.
Mr. Chair, considering the last amendment that was proffered by the good Senator Barnett, I would like to withdraw my objection to the amendment as amended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Anyone else like to speak on the amendment to the amendment? There being, or the amendment as amended? There being none, Senator Snickers, do you feel you need to close? There being none, are there any objection? I don't see any objection. Amendment as amended passes. Now we'll go to the next amendment. Next amendment is with JB. Senator Tina. On the faculty's salary adjustment, ma'am. Your amendment, if you could please read it, and then we can move from there.
Mr. Chair, I was making sure I got the right amendment. Colleagues, this amendment is to add a new section in Chapter 11, miscellaneous provisions onto the bill to read, UOG faculty salary adjustments, notwithstanding the provisions of Section 4 of Public Law 36-106, the sum of $3,600,367 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2022 rainy day funds to the University of Guam for the University of Guam faculty salary adjustments. Earlier, Mr. Chair, on previous chapters, I tried to put this amendment in, and now I want to reiterate this, trying from a different fund. I proffered this appropriation from the rainy day fund to the University of Guam for this faculty salary adjustments, and I again reiterate that in its fiscal year 2024 budget request, the University of Guam sought funding to begin adjusting its faculty salary schedule that was established in 1991 and has not truly been adjusted for the past 30 years. Mr. Chair, I want to note that it is clear that this salary schedule is outdated and it has not been able to account for a recent major inflation adjustments. UOG continues to see its faculty leave for better opportunities with higher salaries within the government of Guam and in other higher education institutions nationwide. UOG faculty provide service to our island community as well as seek additional funding through competitive research grants that ultimately benefit our island revenues, garnering over $44 million in grant awards in 2021 alone. The UOG, Mr. Chair, Board of Regents has approved through its own Resolution 22-43 an update to the faculty salary schedule by 20% and is estimated to cost $3.6 million. We have since received emails from members of the UOG Student Government Association, Austin Geismer, Fortuno, and Julianne Laxamana, asking that we prioritize higher education in this budget, especially as UOG promises not to increase tuition. I'm hoping that my colleagues also prioritize higher education and support this amendment. I will note, Mr. Chair, I've still got 7 minutes left. I note that earlier, Mr. Chair, I did ask that the documents that was sent in by the UOG faculty union in reference to the studies that they've done, I've provided that earlier. It's the same one. So I'd like to save a tree, but just note it for the record that it has been submitted, and I literally hope and sincerely hope that my colleagues will at least support this effort. Si Diyos Masi. Thank you for giving me that time.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Does anyone like to speak to this amendment? I know that Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the amendment. My daughter the other day scolded me. She says, you know, you better support the university. You got your degree there. Your kids got their degree there. Your mom got your degree there. So this is a very, very important institution. It's It's like a synagogue or a church. It's very sacred to me. And so I support the amendment and I thank the author. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I know that there is an amendment to this amendment, but anyone else like to speak to this amendment first? There being none, I beg your pardon? Senator Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think everybody is kind of like holding their breath when it comes to the rainy day fund. You know, we just came through a typhoon. And if there was any time to utilize this rainy day fund, and the reason why we put we have a rainy day fund, which we only started putting funding in there only just 2 years ago. Last year, I think, and then this year. But we were able to do it in FY22, I believe, when we had some additional funding, excess revenue, and we were able to put some money in the rainy day fund because it hasn't been, it was empty. It was like zero. So we decided to build that rainy day fund up. And the rainy day fund, I'm trying to look at the law that it was created. With the rainy day fund and why it should be in place. If you give me, can I just take 1 minute recess, Mr. Chair? I'm still going through the guidelines of the Guam Code annotated as to why we created it. And for some reason, my internet
We'll do a
is,
recess,
okay,
but just
thank you.
understand that the amendment said notwithstanding, so it didn't matter even if whatever you
The
wanna
amendment
speak about
says
it.
notwithstanding?
Okay. Yeah, the amendment says notwithstanding.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
okay.
Yeah, I understand that, but you know, we got to be, okay, anyways, thank you, Mr. Chair. Give me 1 minute, please. Thank you.
All right, you got 1 minute recess. Committee Hall is called back to order. Senator Tello, we're going to finish up with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you, especially to my colleagues, for indulging me to try and pull up the rainy day fund and its purpose and try to go back in history of what we've done for the rainy day. There was an opportunity where we increased in FY2022, increased the revenues to accommodate the rainy day fund by 15 million. So at this point, I can assume we have about 15 million in the rainy day fund. That's just one. That's all we have. We also included that any excess revenue from FY22, there was part of that legislation that would also be appropriated to the rainy day fund, a certain percentage. And I think Steve is going to kind of read that, but we really don't even know if there was any excess revenue in FY22 at this point because an audit hasn't been put out. So we don't know if there's anything above 15 million. Now, Mr. Chair, you know that. Oh, sir, did you have something to say? Oh, okay. So you know now that it's when we appropriate the rainy day fund, it's not like all of a sudden, you know, boom, 16 million is going into the rainy day fund come October 1st. No, certain amounts are set aside every month to be placed into the rainy day, a certain percentage, to build up that amount. So right now we can safely say there's 15 million. And the point of the rainy day fund, Mr. Chair, was to, according to them, the rainy day fund shall be expended by appropriation for law for the following purposes: eliminating and reducing any general fund deficit existing at the end of a fiscal year, subsequently resulting from unexpected substantial decline in revenues received or due by the general fund, or prior year obligations or vendors payable was another area that is set for the rainy day fund. Then for B, for the expenses caused by Guam emergencies. Guam emergencies. So now this body is going to start treating the rainy day fund as funding for increased salaries. Increased salaries coming from a rainy day fund. That's not what the purpose of a rainy day fund is. We just had a major typhoon, and it's anticipated that another one might pop up soon too. We don't have that $50 million right now to bail us out again on another typhoon if it should hit us. Or another pandemic. That's why we created the rainy day fund, not to subsidize pay raises. That's ridiculous. You all know that, and in your good conscience, you know that. So when you sleep tonight and think about how you took money out of a rainy day fund to take care of salaries, increase in salaries, not just your regular salary, but this is like a salary increase. You know that's wrong. I think everybody here has money set aside in case of emergencies. And you live within your means. But sometimes emergencies pop up that you couldn't foresee, or you even prepare for. Mr. Chair, we've got $30 million in vendor payables at the Guam Memorial Hospital. $30 million. And if you ask me, the rainy day fund actually has that in law to cover that. What happens next year? We're going to raid the rainy day fund for any salary increases? We have to learn to live within our means. And right now, this amendment does not live within its means, and I object to this amendment full-heartedly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My time is up.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Anyone else like to comment on the amendment? Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also echo the comments that were made by my good colleague from Tamuning. I think what we're continuing to see is where we really don't want to wrestle with the reality that there are limits to the amount of money we can appropriate, but it doesn't seem that way with this current legislature or the last. You know, this idea that we will just continue to fund anything and everything, and when we can't find, you know, excess revenue sources to do it, now we're going to raid the rainy day fund. I don't see how the issue before us addresses the health and welfare of the community. That this is something that would qualify as falling under the categories that Senator Tello just outlined. And I think it continues to show the lack of fiscal responsibility and fiscal accountability of the legislature, should you, my colleagues, vote for this. There are limits to how much money we can appropriate, and the needs are endless, and we understand that. We all have projects that we would like to support and initiatives in the government that we would all like to support. But to now use this as a means, if the rainy day fund now is just looked at as another cash cow for us to raid for every appropriation that we want to do, then we're not being fiscally responsible because we're not setting aside the money that we are going to need. And colleagues, there is a cash. I don't know if you feel it. I feel it. You feel it? I got that feeling. I got that feeling there's a cash crunch. Because you know what? Under this administration that touted how supportive they were going to be of health care, you know, you sit in at the hearing for the budget for GMH. And as, you know, Senator Tello had mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, 22,000, that was just as of a few weeks ago, of vendor payables still owed. And the response, as it was here just not even a week and a half ago from the head of GMH, Ms. Lillian Posadas, is, we'll just, you know, we work with other vendors. Do you guys buy that? When we know that there are individuals that we know that actually work at the hospital that know they're scrambling up there to get the basic medicines and materials that they need to take care of patients. Wouldn't you consider that life and death? And they're still struggling. Nothing's changed, guys. If anything, some things actually have gotten worse. Let's just go down the list. But you know, the lack, I tell you, I've come out of a time warp because I've come from a time where we were very limited. We're very critical of administration. Oh, they took the money for this, they took the money out of that, they didn't put it back. Yeah, and we know why they took it out. They took it out just to make payroll. I remember the last hours of a Friday on payday that they're scrambling to get enough money, even calling the good old bank. Man, give us some advance because we got to pay GMH. Those days are not that far ahead of us, colleagues, and you're going to find out. I hope, yes, you know, we're still here another year. You'll be here to feel some of that. This is not an limitless amount of money that we can continue to appropriate for everything. We prioritize pay raises over the maintenance of our schools, hiring additional police officers. The list goes on, colleagues. And now we have critical needs, even at GMH, that are still there. Critical needs in our school, even though, you know, the new superintendent says, oh no, please, don't give me $20 million, I don't need it. And yet we want to continue to address, and, you know, we can say it's for a good cause and for a good reason. I don't object to the intention of this, but I object to the source of it. And if this is now going to be the reason we're going to raid that too till there's nothing, then wow, what are you going to tell the people of Guam when there's no money, when there's no cash? I mean, we can appropriate to the moon. Why don't we appropriate to Saturn or Mars? But if the cash is not there, and we're already seeing the cash shortfalls in our government, colleagues, I feel it. And I'm not even in the mainstream of this administration, and I feel it, and I see it because I see critical things not getting paid with real cash and real money. And when you have vendors that are not getting paid, do you think they're going to keep riding on the government and keep providing services and supplies to the government? If we can't even get that at our hospital, colleagues, if DOE can't even prioritize maintaining the facilities of schools because they wanted the pay raise more than they wanted the schools maintained, and we're going to just ride that bandwagon and get right on and say, yeah, this is our priority, then I think your priorities are pretty messed up. I definitely object, Mr. Chairman, to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking for any other hands up there for the amendment. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we get OFB to please tell us the balance of the rainy day fund beginning with FY21 and then how much was actually put in FY22 and FY23?
The 15 million is still there, but what is the balance there for 21? Is that the 28 that Grace was talking about? No, the Grace was talking about 13. Correct. For 22. What is that? Huh? It's not.
There was 0 in 21.
Yes. So in 2021, what is the total appropriation in 22? The 13 million, right? Okay. Yes, Speaker, to your answer, if you recall in FY21, we did allocate the 2% for the year, but at the same time, we suspended the 2%. So the answer to your question, there is 0 balance for FY21.
But what was the balance before that? 0?
Yes, Senator, to your question, I do not have that information, the balance in FY20. Going on to FY22, I believe we appropriated the 13 million, but we also had that appropriation appropriated for various appropriations, I believe, in the law. But we also adjusted the revenues to include an additional 15 million, which currently right now is still showing in the general ledger account at DOA. So that 15 million is still there. And I believe the balance of the FY22 amount, I think is like 13 some million. There's approximately 28,000 remaining of the FY22 2% rainy day fund.
Wait a minute. You said there's 15 million in FY22. Then you said 28,000.
Okay, let me explain, okay? Remember in FY22, we did set aside, I believe, $14 million for FY22 2% rainy day fund. But we also took that same amount and appropriated. We appropriated that amount. Of that amount, there's approximately 28,000 available. In addition to FY22, we also appropriated and we adjusted the revenues to include an additional 15 million. That 15 million is still in the general ledger account.
All right, thank you. And FY23?
We're going to take a short recess. There's something wrong with the microphones on this side. We are back from recess. We apologize. There were some technical difficulties that we had to correct. We are back, and Speaker, you still have the floor.
Thank you. I had asked OFB to please report on the rainy day. This is an appropriation from the rainy day fund, so I asked them to report on the balance of the rainy day fund prior to 2021, how much we set aside in 21, 22, and 23.
Thank you, Senator. Again, anything prior to FY21, I don't have that information as to what the balance is on the rainy day fund. For FY21, we went ahead and appropriate 12.6 million plus in the FY21 budget, but at the same time, we also put a provision in the budget to suspend it. So in other words, that 12.6 million that we identified in terms of revenues, we went ahead and appropriated as part of the government's operation. In FY22, we identified 13.6 million, again in the FY22 budget, but in the same budget, we went ahead and again and suspended the rainy day fund for FY22. In FY22, we also adjusted the revenues to include an amount of $15 million in the rainy day fund. To date, that $15 million is still in a general ledger account titled rainy day or rainy day fund. In FY23, we have a total of 15.4 million that was set aside in the revenues category, in the budget, and that 15.4 million is still there.
What do you mean there?
I'm sorry, it's still appropriated in the law. It's still reflected in the FY23 budget and has not been used.
Has it been deposited into the fund?
I believe it should have been. The only thing that we're looking at right now in the general ledger, and I believe I need to qualify from DOA whether or not the 15 million that was put in the rainy day fund was in a general fund ledger only for FY22, but I would follow up with them to follow whether or not they have a general ledger account for the rainy day fund for FY23.
Yeah, so that's not reported on the CRER?
To my knowledge, Senator, no.
On the July CRER, they reported appropriations from the FY22 2% reserve set aside from, right? So they tell us what we've spent out of it. But yes, so in preparing the budget today, we don't know the balance of the rainy day fund. Well, you're saying you can see 15. You don't know whether they're owed 15.4 more or whether they've already deposited that and spent it for some other purpose. We don't know anything about it?
That's correct, Senator.
But according to your records then, we should have the 15 from FY22 and the 15.4 from FY23, right? Unless they show something else, but they're not showing. And you're only seeing in the fund right now 15?
The only things that we have information on is for the FY22 15 million is still reflected in a general ledger account. I don't have access to general ledger accounts in the system, but I have been informed that 15 million is there.
All right, I know, but we need to know whether that came from 22 or 23 for our purposes, I think. And because we're also setting aside 16.6 for 24, and if it's not getting in there, I would like to know that right now today so that we don't waste our time trying to put money there and holding ourselves back from spending it when they're spending it. I would like to know. So can you also tell us for FY19, after the audit, there was a $35.6 million surplus. Where is that money now?
I would say, and this is just from my own recollection, any funds reflected as a surplus in any fiscal year normally will be recorded in the fund as such. It would supposedly, for tracking purposes, that money will be there. Whether or not, Senator, there's cash on that, I can safely say to date, probably no. But in terms of the authority that was granted in FY 2019 versus the expenditures, that balance should be reflected in the FY2019 audit.
Right, 35.6 million audited surplus. In FY20, there was a 46.3 million audited surplus. FY21, 30 million audited surplus. I don't remember us going back and appropriating that money, but we are today, well, anyways, I think we should have a full picture of what funds are available to us and whether these rainy day funds are available or not. So I don't necessarily object to the use of this if these audited balances are still available or the deposits are actually been made according to the law to the rainy day fund, then the balance should be over 30 million. So that's the issue, is why is it not? But I'd like to propose an amendment to this amendment, Madam Chair. It's to change the last part of the, so the original amendment is to give 3.6 million appropriated from the rainy day fund to UOG for faculty salary adjustments. And I'd like to amend it to say, to give those same funds to UOG, period. And make UOG do what it has been doing all these years and make it decide whether it's going to prioritize faculty raises over scholarships, prioritize faculty raises over free textbooks, prioritize faculty raises over tuition, increases. And of course, I want to add the sentence that says the University of Guam shall not raise tuition during fiscal year 2024 because we're giving them these extra funds. Now, they did testify they could use these funds for other purposes, and there is already a provision in this budget bill that allows them to do a study for faculty raises. So that's totally up to them. It has always been their authority to control faculty salaries. In our law, it says faculty is exempt from any of our personnel rules, and those are controlled by the University of Guam. So I don't want in this fiscal year to all of a sudden jump in there and say we now are necessary to give these raises to faculty. It's always been the prerogative of the Board of Regents. They just have to prioritize how they are spending their money. So if they need the 3.6, I'm willing to give it to them, but I want them to be the ones to decide whether that's for faculty raises or for other purposes for the students, and I prefer it go towards the students, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, does everybody have that amendment in front of them? It's file number SB26 TMT P114. Does everyone have the amendment to the amendment? Okay, we're going to take a short recess and try to make sure everybody has it, and then 30 seconds. Okay. Just going to take a 30-second recess. Okay, we're back from recess. While we get a copy to some of our colleagues, I'll recognize Senator San Agustin on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of helping University of Guam. I'm an alumni of University of Guam. And I also support the students, so don't raise tuition. But I only have reservations on the area of the Board of Regents. By statute, they're supposed to determine if the tuition goes up or not. And that's the only reservation I have. But in general, I support the amendment. And as we were talking earlier, as my colleagues were speaking with how much do we have on the rainy day fund, I just want to comment that number one, how money is deposited on a monthly basis. It's not at the end of the year. Money is added as they go along. So I'm waiting for BBMR and DOA to give me a response exactly how much money is there in the rainy day fund. And as soon as I get it, I will provide that for all our colleagues here. But as far as anything else, I support the amendment. But I still say I got reservations for board reasons, but I will support the amendment because it's about the University of Guam and it's about the students. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Okay, Senator Roy, you were recognized first. Okay, you would like to yield to Senator Fisher. Senator Fisher, you're up.
Yes, thank you. I'm just actually making a motion to divide the amendment. There are two things going on in it. The first one is an outlay of $303.6 million from the Rainy Day Fund to the University of Guam. The second unrelated provision is that the university shall not raise tuition during the fiscal year 2024. There is no conjoining of the two. They are standalone and independent and not related one to the other, so I'm moving to divide the, I'm sorry?
I disagree, Mr. Chair, and I object. This is,
I'm
of
sorry,
course,
I'm sorry, I'm not finished.
very
I'm not
tightly
finished.
related.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not finished.
Okay. I just want to make sure, Senator Fisher, you understand that the amendment to the amendment is to give the money to the University of Guam and to tell the University of Guam they cannot raise tuition. That's the amendment. So as long as you're speaking to
I
that.
have to disagree. I can read this just as well as anybody. There is no conjunction, so connecting one to the other. These are two independent notions, and I'm moving to divide them.
Oh, you're moving to divide it. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
And that is a motion.
Madam Vice
There's
Speaker.
a point of information,
Point of
sir,
information,
because
please.
there's an amendment to the original amendment. You have to do one amendment at a time. Please call for the moment's recess because you
Yes.
can't bifurcate. Right?
Yeah, you can't
Thanks.
bifurcate at this time. Are there any objections? Anyone else would like to speak to the amendment, so we can move forward? Senator Roy.
Hold on, call a recess. Call a moment's recess because
A moment recess, please, because Senator Fisher was still. Committee of the Whole, go back to order. Back to the concern of bifurcating the amendment. I'm going to rule that there's no need because it's an amendment to the amendment. It's an add-on to it, and you're not required. I spoke to legal, not required to bifurcate it, so we're going to leave it as is, unless the colleague that sounds it would like to overrule the chair, then make that motion, then we'll go through the votes. Senator Fisher.
Sir, thank you very much for the time to explore this issue with other colleagues. It doesn't seem to me in this, it doesn't seem to me that we were able to flesh out entirely what the import and implications of this amendment to the amendment are. That being the case, I move to lay the amendment to the amendment on the table.
Objection.
There's an objection.
Call for a vote. It's non-debatable.
All in favor of Senator Fisher's motion, which is to bifurcate, am I correct? Or what?
No, no, because of the, I think, if I can, sir, thank you. I will withdraw the motion to divide or bifurcate, but I have a further motion, because this is so unexplored, to lay the amendment to the amendment on the
Mr. Chair,
table.
may I offer a point of information? We had proffered and passed a similar amendment in prior legislation. So just a point of information that it was in this actual legislature that we did that, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sir, the motion is non-debatable.
Okay,
It also takes precedence over other motions.
there is an objection. Your motion is you're going to withdraw, but you still have the option to amend the amendment, correct?
I suppose if I wanted to do that, but the motion I'm making right now is to lay the Speaker's amendment to the amendment on the table pursuant to, I think it's 121.7. Masons?
All right. And there's an objection. Two objections. All in favor of Senator Fisher's motion? Please raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, the language that was proffered earlier to lay the amendment, to lay it, I don't understand what that means, so I'm not going to vote on something I don't understand. So can we get an clarification from legal what that means? Does it mean that he's objecting to the amendment, or I really would like to know, moving forward, because this language of laying, I've never heard it before, so I'd like to ask legal if I can get 1 minute recess to find out, okay?
All right.
You have this book?
thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to understand what that means, and, I object too as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now there are 3 objections. Can we have a show of hands in support of the motion of Senator Fisher?
It already failed.
Already? No, but we have to pause. But, okay, it failed. So we're done with that. Let's just move on. Back to the amendment. Do the amendment. Madam Speaker, please. Is there anybody else you wanted to speak on that one? Thank you, Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, we have an amendment here that does, it really doesn't do anything as far as, taking it from the rainy day fund. We're still taking it from the rainy day fund. This time we were just changing it up a bit by allowing EOG to decide where this $3.6,367,000, to be precise. So it only tells me that this is definitely for salary adjustments, which still it says here, faculty salary adjustments. Now, the University of Guam shall not raise tuition during fiscal year 2024. I support that. I totally support that. But, once again, we are dodging the reality of rating the rainy day fund for salaries. What's going to happen next year? How are we going to fund the salaries next year? Because that money is not going to go away. They're going to still come back to us next year for $3,667,367. Where's that money going to come from then? We go back into the rainy day fund? You might as well change that fund to a different name and call it the Salary Adjustment Fund. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Senator Tello. Anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Senator Canata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not too sure if the author of this amendment to the amendment would yield to the question. I just wanted to clarify, because I did raise this issue up in the prior GPP issue, that if we were to basically tie the hands for the WASC accreditation for EOG, would this in any way impede the university's WASC accreditation?
Madam Speaker, do you yield to that question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the answer will change depending on who you ask, but that's the whole point. If they think they can come in here and tell us they need money and they want the legislature to determine whether they're going to raise their faculty salaries or not, I think that should be affecting their WASC accreditation or independence. So, but I think for us to give money on a condition that they do not raise tuition, I think that's perfectly legitimate for a legislature to do, and it's up to them whether they accept it or not.
I hope that suffices, Senator Canada.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone like to speak on the amendment, to the amendment? Senator Blas, did you want to speak? No? Senator Barnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of the amendment to the amendment. I think it's a good call to really put it on the University of Guam to decide where they want to put this $3.6 million. And I know that I've been getting messages from faculty who support the amendment to the amendment, and I've also been in receipt of a lot of messages from students at the University of Guam who have expressed their concern about the University of Guam not getting the $42 million budget that they wanted, and so this $3.6 million will definitely go a long way, and I think that putting it on the University of Guam and letting the University of Guam decide if they want to address the long-standing issues with faculty parity, or if they want to put it into scholarships, because we do need more scholarships, or if they want to put it into more student support services, or if they want to do a combination of any of those things. And so And I also agree, I know that we had, I actually had proffered a similar amendment during the general pay plan discussion that had passed, and I know that the University of Guam had come out with a subsequent press release where they had raised the concern that the previous speaker had also raised, but nothing came of it. And I don't think that we are outside of our authority when we appropriate money and attach conditions to that appropriation, Mr. Chair. So I rise in full support of the amendment, and I also ask my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Senator Brown, you want to speak to the amendment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, I don't object to the purpose of the funds. I'm concerned about the fact that we're prioritizing this. And what I don't see, and I don't know how many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have actually run an agency. Maybe one. Are there two besides Senator Tina that's ever run a government operation for an substantial period of time when the money's not flowing as much as we've seen? No? What I don't see is prioritization. What I don't see is looking in your operations to determine what is most critical, and that's what you prioritize. The expectation that we're going to come this case of pay raises, colleagues, and I hope you're here, I hope we're all here, to see what the impacts are going to be when we're not able to address paying vendor payments. I'm surprised, the mover of this particular amendment who oversees the hospital. We're not making vendor payments. Why are we not making vendor payments, Mr. Chairman? What are the odds? Maybe the cash is not there. At least as a few weeks ago, $22 million. And we know, like I said, from sources at the hospital that actually work there, they're not getting the equipment and the supplies and the medical supplies that they need to take care of our dear people that are up at the hospital. What's our credit rating up there? What about vendors that are not getting paid and all of a sudden are not providing any additional supplies and equipment? Because all of a sudden, wow, Gov Guam, or maybe long term, we've had such a bad reputation for so long, are not getting paid. But you guys still want to prioritize pay raises over everything else, because that's the most important. Look at DOE last year. We knew. We didn't authorize the increases. We didn't look, 3%, 4%, 5%, no, 22% on the election year, knowing full well the money was going to be taken out of the maintenance for the supplies and repairs of the deficiencies in our public schools that some of our colleagues rant and rave on this floor about, and the need to fund it, but no, pay raises were the priority. And colleagues, all of you that voted for it, I'm going to remind you that that was your priority over the schools, over the children, over the health care of our people. Because those are tangible and direct connections to where we're saying this is so important. Well, by the way, I want to amend and I'm going to do this. Like I said, I hate hypocrisy. Stand for what you believe in, but my goodness, at least stand for it. And when the time comes to make the decision to actually vote to put your money where your mouth is, I don't see us bending over backwards to put this money towards paying the vendor payables at GMH. That's where my reservation is. I don't, good for everybody else, but you're driving this government into the ground. Because and you, Mr. Chairman, you and I have talked about this. We know 2024 is going to be a very tough year. And 2025 and 2026, and anybody here who wants to run for re-election or has any ambition to run for higher office, perhaps you're going to inherit this mess that you helped create. Because we're already going through major cash falls in this government. The fact that we have that much payables owed, unless that's owed on a normal owed at GMH, $22 million that have not been paid. And they're way beyond the 120 days. Unless you buy, the representation from GMH that, we're working with other vendors. What other vendor in their right mind is going to want to deal with GMH when they know all the other vendors weren't paid? So colleagues, this is your priority, pay raises. Tell the people of Guam when you run for office next year what your priorities were. Do we have enough cops on the street? No. Do we have enough to provide how many more training for the cops? No. Less firefighters, less custom agents. Let's go down the list and tell me what is better. We've increased the cost substantially. We put so much obligation on short-term revenue, and the areas that directly affect our public where it matters are not better. Not in education, so get up and talk about education, get up and talk about healthcare, but when the time comes, that's not our priority. Our priority are pay raises. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I object to this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Looking across, anyone else would like to speak to the amendment? The amendment to the amendment. There being none, and I heard there an objection. Madam Speaker, you wanted to?
Yes, I just want to point out, thanks to my colleagues again for the debate, but my amendment to this amendment would very clearly say pay raises are not our priority, but education, University of Guam, still is. That's all, not the pay raises. That's exactly why we're amending the amendment. And we're making it very clear to the students that although they've been told to message us that the teachers need a raise, that the University of Guam could use that money for anything that they need, including scholarships in very critical areas that we need for our hospital, who is still short of nurses, nurse assistants, all health professionals, in fact, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, all of it. The university could use this money to prioritize. And they've told us that they're short, and so, I don't know. There's a lot of talk. The whole point of the amendment was that we strike out the words faculty salary adjustments, and we say to the University of Guam. Now, I agree with those who are, sensitive to it being taken from the rainy day fund. This was, we've tried several amendments, all for healthcare, public safety, and education, from excess funds that we know are there, but have been called phantom money, or from rainy day funds that we have been just told that are there. In fact, there should be a lot more there, but OFB hasn't been able to track that yet. So we might have issues tracking how much is there, but what our reports are showing us is that, and our budgets, if they're following the law, the money's there. And if we want to account for every illegal expenditure or, rerouting of these funds that we've seen after the fact sometimes, I can't do that. So I want to count on the reports that we receive, and I want to prioritize. And I'm just, I want to respect the autonomy of the University of Guam somewhat and say, spend it how you need to spend it. But I agree, if they spend it on faculty raises and then come back next year and ask us for more money again, that's not going to go over very well. So I'm pleading with them and the students to pressure their own university as well to spend that money on student scholarships in very critical areas. Spend it on student resources. So that's what I would like the university to do, the money that I know is there in the fund. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There is an objection. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. The amendment to the amendment, okay? Motion passes. Now to the amendment as amended. And I know Senator Blas raised his hand, he wanted to speak on that. And I need to remind my colleagues that already spoke on the amendment. Oh, no, you can speak again, I guess. Senator Blas, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this thing has been amended so many. Is this amendment still taking the money from the rainy day fund? Mr. Chair? Is this amendment still proposed to take the money from the rainy day fund?
Yes, it still does.
Okay. You know, Mr. Chair,
Notwithstanding.
Notwithstanding. Okay. I understand. And please, don't take that. I'm sure the University of Guam would be able to utilize this funding the way they see it necessary. A couple things. First off, the way, in as far as when this amendment first started, it was to be able to provide salary adjustments. I guess one of the questions that I had was, where did this request come from? Did it come from the University of Guam, or did it come from the faculty themselves?
It came from the Board of Regents.
Came from the Board of Regents.
And which is the University of Guam.
Okay, well, you know, and it always goes to the question, always the adage, if you don't ask for it, the answer is always going to be no. So I don't blame them for it, okay? And I don't blame the attempt of trying to find where to be able to get it. However, we have to stand by a principle. This legislature created what is known to be the Rainy Day Fund, because we created it in the days when it rained a lot. We created it in the days when we didn't know where we were going to get money to be able to make payroll. We created it in the days when there were difficulties in revenue projections. And those days are going to come again. I think anybody who understands or who's studied basic economics understands that the economy is cyclical. Okay? What has happened before will happen again. And if we don't learn from the first time it happens, nor the second time, shame on us when it happens the third time. And while in the last 3 or 4 years we've reveled in the millions of dollars of monies that came to us because of the pandemic and now the disasters, we're creating our own disaster and not preparing for the next one. That's what the Rainy Day Fund is for. I have to agree that if we can find somewhere else, if we can carve somewhere else that this can happen, maybe a little bit more palatable. But as the good senator from Pago Bay had mentioned, we're doing this knowing full well that our hospital is about $22 million short in vendor payments, that our streets are still being riddled with crime, that our businesses who were shut down because of government operations are still struggling. That's what we're doing this for. I mean, we're doing this although those other things are occurring. And you know, sometimes you look at budgets, I would think that you would look at this government budget as you would look at the budget at home. You like to be able to go on a trip, but you have to fix the plumbing. You want to go and eat that fancy dinner, but your power bill has got to get paid. We've got bills to pay that need to be paid. I think that's what the rainy day fund was for, not this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blas. You know, colleagues, I'm looking at the clock. It's 11:47. Let's recess till 2 o'clock. Thank you.